To whom much is given, much is required. Part of that requirement is sharing. Culture is the heartbeat within our lives, and it's at the core of so many things. While we live in a time when we are starving for wisdom, I welcome you to your wisdom retreat at Culture Raises Us. Today's guest, none other than Jay Erving, an accomplished music visionary who's worked with the likes of a Flowetry, a Eve, a Nelly, Fat Joe, The Lox, Tyga, John Legend, Megan Trainor, to name just a few, but many. He's currently the founder and CEO of Human Resources, which is actually one of the top distribution companies in the industry right now, and is really disrupting things as it relates to breaking music. Before we have him kind of walk us through his journey, I want to start with, when you hear culture, what does that mean to you, my friend?
Well, thanks for starters. Thanks for your kind words, Astor, and the introduction. You know, I think when I think of culture, you know, I think of I actually oftentimes refer to the people that have moved culture, right, and create culture. I think music is culture, art is culture, food is culture. You know, obviously people's where they come from and what their makeup is and their nationalities, I think applies itself to culture. Culture to me is a feeling. You know, it's not something that it's that thing that you get in your stomach that is sometimes hard to describe. You know, it's that to me is what culture is about. I think that, you know, it's the opposite of X's and O's, you know, like when,
right.
You know, just to kind of get into my journey a little bit, when I was coming out of college, I kind of knew what I couldn't do, which was take a more traditional 9-to-5 type job, because my makeup isn't, I couldn't sit behind a desk from, 9 a.m. till 6 o'clock. And it kind of shaped my, the trajectory of my career and kind of going into music and entertainment, because I wanted to be close to culture. I wanted to be close to those things that give you feeling and give you emotion. And, you know, culture can, have you tear up, and culture can have you feel proud, and culture can have you feel, sad, but culture can also be the thing that, kind of saves your day or saves your week, or, ultimately, saves your well-being. So I think there's a lot of different ways to look at culture, but I want to be close to culture movers and future culture movers, and people like yourself that have moved culture for decades now. So
yeah, and obviously you fit right into that sweet spot, and I love how you utilize even your journey as a reference to the definition of culture, right? And not feeling like you needed to conform to the programming of the 9-to-5. And I'm so thankful that you tapped into that gift and that bug within you that told you and made you feel, which is another thing that you associated with culture, that there was something different for you out there, and that you were meant to take on, which you've done such a great job of. And I think is a great jump into, tell everybody a little bit more about yourself, as I just hit the surface of some of the people you've worked with, but I think it'd be great to share some of your journey with the listeners.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, Astor, I'll take it a little further back than where I started in terms of my professional career.
Please do.
I had we have a mutual friend, Chris Wright, who's over at Jordan, and he called me one time and he said, "Hey, I want you to speak to my team." And of course I was like, "Cool." And I hit him the day before and I was like, "Hey, what's the agenda for tomorrow? Like, what do you want me to talk about? Like, what's the kind of run a show?" And
right.
He said, "I was hoping you didn't ask me, because I wanted it to be, I kind of wanted it to be super, natural, and I wanted to ask you some questions and get a very natural response from you." And I said, "Okay, we'll get into it, the next day." And he started to ask me about some of the hurdles that I had in my life. Mm-hmm. And it was, I even got emotional a bit and, kind of dug into some things that I never would have touched on and talked about with that group of people. And when we got off the call, he was like, I did that because I want to encourage you to speak on those things more, right? And as a friend, he knew that I needed to, and I, and oftentimes because of, and I rarely even bring it up, but oftentimes because of who my father is, you know, there can be some confusion about my trajectory, or kind of what some of the hurdles that I had to get over, and it's, my mom is from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, so from the mud. My dad ultimately is from Hempstead Projects, and he actually played basketball in a different era, right? There wasn't $100 million contracts, and there wasn't some of these things that exist now. So, between the city living project background of my dad and the Southern values of my mom, that's where I was shaped, and those are the kind of values that I was given, and the work ethic that I was given. And, ultimately along the way, I lost a brother to drugs. I have an older brother who still is a drug addict and lives in the street. And you kind of, I put a lot of my, instead of dealing with those things, I kind of put it into work, and just kind of keep it on, and just said I have to focus. But it also made me strive harder, to work harder, to become, to be more successful, to become, a better friend, a better brother, a better advocate for certain issues. And I started, like I started to touch on earlier, when I was coming out of college, I looked around at my friends, and Chris in particular. Chris had gone every summer to intern. He was interning with Reebok when we were in our last year at college. And some of my other friends kind of knew what they were going to do. And I was a little confused, and I was like, all right, I don't know what I'm going to do. I kind of know what I can't do, but I don't know really what I'm going to do. And I always had a passion for music, and had a buddy who was working in the music business named Charles Suit, and he encouraged me to go into music management, and felt like management was a way where you can learn every aspect of an artist's career, right? Because some days you're therapist, some days you're,
your father, your big brother.
Exactly, and you have to wear all of these hats, but you're dealing with the label, you're dealing with the lawyer, you're dealing with the business manager, you're dealing with marketing, you're dealing with making music, making albums. And he felt like that was a good way for me to learn the entire music business, and then I could figure out where I wanted to sit. And I ended up, being a manager for 20 years, partnered with a guy named Troy Carter, who was a Philly guy as well. But one of the smartest people I know, one of the most forward-thinking people that I know. And, we got blessed, early to sign some really big acts, and really be in the game in a real way. And then, it was about educating myself as much as I could, because at the time I was what we later described as, a homeboy manager, just friends with some of these artists. And I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just kind of winging it. But we started to learn about, the rest of the world. The world was, at first it was Philly. Like, we had shit that was hot in Philly, and it was like, then you drive an hour and a half to New York, and it's like, people are like, who, what? Like, they'll have a clue. And it's like, oh shit, I'm not as I thought I was, and then you got excited out in New York, and then it was like, we made it to LA and to Miami and to Atlanta, and it's like figuring out that the world was bigger than Philly. But then we realized that the world was bigger than the United States, and we started to look at, opportunities outside of the US, and, just really continue to educate myself as a manager. The interesting thing about music management is there's not a blueprint to it, right? You can't read a book that says, hey, when this happens with this artist, you do this. And then when you do, like, every situation is bespoke, and and it's all experiential, and you just got to learn from having experienced it and gone through it, and how you deal with it is how you learn. And I was a manager for over 20 years, and more recently, Troy and I decided to shut down our management company, And I kind of sat on my hands for a second, figuring out what I wanted to do next. And, quickly realized, how much credit is currency, because, Troy's much better at, you know, presenting himself, being the face of our business, the way in which he's politicked with the who's who and put himself in front of, being that person that is on the precipice of technology and music, and where those two intersect, and did a really amazing job of branding how smart, sophisticated, forward-thinking he is. And that was a tougher task for me. And I wasn't, the beauty of our partnership is I always got to do what I loved, and I got to stay in my respective lane and do what I loved, and I didn't have to do a lot of the frontward facing things that Troy has done. But I realized when we shut down our management company, I had no offers for jobs. I didn't, I wasn't highly sought after. I was forced back into being an entrepreneur. It wasn't by choice necessarily. And I ultimately decided to start a distribution with label services company called Human Resources. And, we did Brent Fayez and this kid Pink Sweats from Philly. We did the YBN crew and others. And labels started reaching out, and ultimately I ended up doing a deal with Sony, where they came in and acquired my business. And I stayed on. I'm still on running the business. But it was a win for, back to your original question of culture. It was a win for the culture. My team is 100% people of color. We're primarily, young folks, non-traditional hires. I didn't go and find, who's the person from this, internship program, or who had, this opportunity or that opportunity. I wanted to just have folks that were passionate, and that were and really would work hard, and also people that were in and of the culture, and that could give me that lens and that kind of point of view. And that's how we built our team out. And we were able to take our entire team with us to Sony. Sony's also supported me. Sony and the Orchard have also supported me in hires that I've made, in hiring, more, people of color. So it's been a good experience, a great experience so far, and I've learned a lot. It's my first time kind of being on the inside, so I've learned a lot from that side of it. But it's kind of my long-winded answer of
no, and I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that you gave all that for so many reasons. One, I'll start with, and I'm going to be all over the place because you said so much that I want to touch on. The first thing is, as I listen to you, I'm getting this notion of experience is a hard teacher, because she gives the test first and the lessons afterwards, which I think you are a complete reflection of that, right? I also think something that you mentioned made me think of, not all who wander are lost.
Yeah.
Right? You talked about your early journey and the early beginnings when you didn't know what you wanted to do, right? You didn't figure it out like seemingly everybody else did. But I applaud Chris for also challenging you to speak to the journey and the adversity, because one of the things that I share a ton with the youngins, as I call it, or just people in general, is look, welcome adversity, because that's what really makes what makes the journey what it is. If you have no adversity, that means you're really not ruffling the right feathers. We're supposed to have the haters. We're supposed to have the challenges, because we're pushing something that needs to be changed, shifted, addressed. And so I applaud Chris for bringing that out of you, to remind you of the things that you had to persevere through, the challenges, the where we come from, to then figure out what it is you're going to tap into and do. And, I've known you for years, and I've watched you move the needle in a very quiet, humble way, right? And when I saw you jump out to do your own thing in the distribution space from a management side of things, it brought a great deal of excitement for me, because I knew your goal wasn't just to be in something, right? And I knew this was going to be another opportunity for you to move the needle. And my hope is to assist with ensuring that we kind of share this great work and this vision for many to be cognizant of, because you represent what I feel is an evolution of music culture right now with what you're doing, which is huge. And so before we deep dive on this work that you're currently doing, that you touched on a little bit, I would love to know, like, with all the artists and all the labels and the companies you've worked with and the eras within music culture that you've worked within over the years, was there a particular moment where you realized just how big and instrumental music culture was to overall culture?
That's a good question, Esther. I think it's when I started really realizing how the impact of music was probably early days with Nelly.
Mm.
And I think that was the first artist that I was associated with that was operating on the highest level, right? Like that was globally, the number one records, the amount of like, and what comes with that, and I think those moments are where you understand the impact is when you go to these shows and you see how people are affected by, like, literally people crying and I like just kind of I have these memories of like, and it's the fun thing is getting to see it 20 plus years later, right? When you sit in the studio and you've made these, you hear these demos, and then the demos turn into finished product, and then ultimately like sitting in these arenas and you got 30,000 people, singing these lyrics word for word, and the emotion that comes with that. I think those are the reminders to me of what music means to culture. And it's stick a pin in what it means financially to these artists and everybody associated with them, but the real impact is the fans and how they are affected by the music, which to me is a reminder of, for any young people out there interested in any of the youngins, as you say, that are interested in getting into music, into film and television, into any medium that it includes art. It all starts with the art, right? It starts with the song. The song always wins every time. The song wins every single time. And if whether it's painting or like acting or whatever it is, like I always encourage young people to master the craft, master the art. And that's why I have to have, people around me that I trust, because some of this young stuff, I might not hear it. I'm 49 years old with 3 kids, and I live in Calabasas, California. I'm not in the streets. Like, I think, I'm not active in outside
activities.
Like, there's things that I'm going to miss and that are, culturally going to make a difference musically and otherwise with young people. But it starts with the music, man, and the way that music is impact. I'm sure for you, for your family, you watch your kids, you watch people around you and how they consume art and consume, most specifically, music. It can change everything. It's like, I'm in the shower today listening to Jagged Edge, and I'm like, where's the 2024 version of Jagged Edge? Where's a group that is, and no disrespect to those guys, like they're done or over, but like, where's the new young version of that?
That's right.
The kids that got some, that have some swag and that have, and make those like real R&B walk right out of heaven records. And you know what I'm saying? Like, so it's like, that's how I started my day, and just listening to them and them coming on a playlist that I had on, it's it changes everything about how you move and what's right. Like, and it brings up, it can affect you in so many different ways.
Yeah, well, when the song comment that you made about the song always wins is so profound on so many levels, and we could talk a little bit about that later too. But the other thing that I noticed in what you mentioned is one of the greatest qualities of a leader is understanding that you don't have all the answers, but also empowering those around you who can help find them. And it was such a thing that you said so seamlessly and with no effort, because it's innate within you and you understand that I'm not going to be able to have my finger on the pulse of everything that's going to lead culture moving forward, as you've done already for over 20 plus years. But it's your job to now empower those who will have that finger on the pulse and allow them a space to provide that insight to get to that place. And again, it sounds so simple, Jay, but it doesn't happen. I mean, so many leaders have these insecurities about thinking they need to have the answer to everything. And if they don't, then they are not a true leader, where I feel it's the complete opposite. And you just said it so eloquently and perfectly as to what a true leader should bring to the table. And that is providing a space and empowering those around them. And so I look at, you launching human resources. I think this is obviously a reflection of that as well, right? How do you bring along, and you said Sony brought the whole team in, right? Which sounds like it was a big thing for you. What was your vision for it, and the void in the industry that you kind of wanted to address with it?
Ownership is really what I wanted to address, and legacy. When we shut down our management company, I was kind of sitting on my hands figuring out what I wanted to do next. And I started to think about legacy. And, I'm proud of the list of artists, and some of which you ran off when we started, that I've worked with over the years. I'm proud of that, right? And I'm proud of those artists, and I'm proud of what we accomplished. But I also don't want my legacy to be, oh, he was a used to manager. He used to manage this guy. He used to manage that guy. He used to manage. And I felt like with ownership, more specifically, and around distribution with services, there is an opportunity for us to continue to educate our community about ownership, right? When we were coming in the game, as you know, Astor, it was all about getting a record deal, right?
Boom.
And that's all we cared about. We felt like when you got the record deal, you were lit. And, when you think about it in hindsight, it's like, oh, when you go to this company and they cut you a little check and you give them all of your rights, for X amount of years, and these albums, this art that you've created in perpetuity, and, they're going to participate in your merch and your touring and your this and that, and they're going to own your name, image, and likeness when you peel it back, it's like, hold on, we gave up all of that for that?
That part.
It's like, one of my
shiny objects. We gave it up for the shiny short-term objects.
Yeah. And one of my buddies and I were talking recently about, ownership, and we talked about Justin Bieber sold his catalog for $200 million, right?
Okay.
His entire catalog deal, $200 million that he got. This just feels like an amazing deal, right? But you look at Andy Warhol sold one painting last year for $180 million.
How about that?
Because his estate owned it. And that's the value in that one particular painting. So when you look at if Andy Warhol had owned all of his, paintings and his quote unquote masters, it's a multi-billion-dollar acquisition, and artists, music is the only medium where artists don't own their art, So it's like in starting Human Resource, my goal was, to give young artists and young managers an option to say, hey, you can own your art here. You can pay a licensing fee, and you can do a short-term deal, and simultaneously we'll give you similar services to what a frontline label would offer you, right? We're not going to expect you to do it all on your own, and we'll stand next to you, shoulder to shoulder, and we'll work these things with you. Was the goal.
The significance of this is so big on what you're doing, and I hate to even say groundbreaking at this time, but it really is, because we should be further along in these conversations and not having you be looked at as doing this amazing thing at this time, given all that we've contributed. However, we are here, and I do want to, I want to applaud you for what you're doing, because even significant is not appropriate for what you are truly doing in terms of providing long-term equity and ownership for the creatives and the communities in which they come from. Because what this is, whether you're searching for the latest sneaker drop, that iconic handbag,
a timeless watch, or your next piece of classic jewelry, eBay authenticators are there verifying every detail of your purchase. Yep, we're talking each inch, stitch, tick, facet, and clasp that make the piece you're searching for worthy of your collection. eBay's authenticators are experts in their craft, true connoisseurs. And as leaders in their fields, they're making sure your items always arrive as authentic as your style. So go ahead, get that piece you've always wanted, and leave it up to the meticulous eyes of an eBay authenticator to make sure that watch movement is original, that glimmer is real gold, that rare sneaker is legit, or that handbag is really made of genuine leather and never get faked over again. In a world full of fakes, it's time to get real with eBay Authenticity Guarantee. Everyone deserves real. Visit ebay.com for terms.
The infectious snowball effect, right? This hopefully becomes the new model that people coming from communities that we came from now look at and say, okay, no, when I get in, it's not about just getting the deal, getting the car or the crib that they're going to put me in for the 6 months. It's like, no, I need the long-term ownership that gets us to those Andy Warhol conversations, right? And that's the shift that you are at the forefront of leading, which I applaud tremendously. But with that, so how can artists, though, in today's climate, which I think is full of, trends and these very short attention spans, how do they ensure longevity outside of just the ownership and the equity piece that you're providing or trying to help provide them with?
I don't think that part has changed. I think the structure of the deals has changed. What young artists and managers have access to have changed, but the longevity thing is going to boil down to, the taste level of your art and your talent, right? And putting the work in. I think it's the difference between soul food and microwave food. Soul food is going to keep you full longer.
That's right.
That's just gonna sit you down, and you can go out and have to take a nap, because it's
Late
fulfilling. But you go and eat some of this microwave food, and you're gonna be hungry in 30 minutes.
That's
So
right.
if people care about their craft, the ones that I've seen have longevity they're meticulous about their live performance. They're meticulous about the level of art and what it is that they put into the world. They're thoughtful about, the moves that they make. They're strategic with their team and their partners about the things that they actually do, and they care, And I think that's the one, I never want to sound like that old guy that's like, picking on the youth, but it's like I encourage, because there is there is a way in which you can create music, distribute music, market music very quickly and easily. That shouldn't change your process in terms of making that art, right? And people, young artists should take their time. And I'm not saying overthink, but I'm saying invest in making sure that the art is to the level that it should be. If you want to have longevity in the game, it's going to boil back down to the art.
Yeah, and earlier you mentioned something that I thought was very key regarding your staff, which I thought was dope, of all of them being people of color. Talk about how important it is to kind of have people on your team who have authentic connections and experiences with music and talent and culture that they're trying to help launch.
So I've coined this frame, people of culture, as well. And that's because our goal is not to alienate anyone, right? I feel like everybody should have opportunities, equal opportunities, and that alienating folks on either side is not something that I subscribe to.
Right.
But my team is people of culture, and what that means specifically is that they're tied to the culture. They're in it. It's like and which is so fun and exciting for me, because again, when you talk about leadership, and I appreciate you recognizing that, how my approach to it, but I'm a servant leader. I work for my team. I learn, I ask questions to them like you would think I'm an intern, like
Right.
I ask, like, what are people listening to over here? What do you think about this? What are your thoughts on artificial intelligence? What spots are y'all eating at these days? Where, like, whatever it is, whatever the questions are, I want to learn from them, and I want to be a sponge, and I want to know, what I've also I've also taken the stock, like, and the funny thing is, Astor, we know so many of those guys that have come from, have that we've grown up in these businesses with, that will sit up there like they know it all, and like they got it all figured out, and like, well, this is how we did it in, when I was
Right.
like, look, it's a different era, it's a different time. Things are different now. So we can't operate like that, and so I come to work humble every single day, and I'm trying to learn from them. And I try to give them my experiences. I try to give them my, the benefit of my 10,000 hours. But the reality is I'm learning. I'm trying to learn from them just as much as they can potentially learn from me. I don't want to be that old guy that gets caught up in, how we did it before, and, has to pay the price for, being stubborn or hard-headed. I don't want to be that. And the reality is, it's their go, it's like we've done great. I've fed my family for 20 plus years off of this space, and it's their go. It's time for me to, push people forward, and, not just my team, but, the young. I try to help all of them as much as I can, because it keeps me in the game.
That's right.
That's to me. That old guy over there helped me do this, and I got, when I come back from my favor or my ask, or so selfishly, it keeps me in the game, where I can lean back into them for for that simple favor that I did, or layup, or assist here or there, or even just some words of advice. So I try to do it as much as I possibly can. But there's so many young guys that I'm so impressed with in terms of how they're moving, how they're building their businesses. It's fun to watch.
Yeah, and the servant leader that you mentioned, which is another one I'm sure you've coined, was, again, another thing that I'd like to extract, because I think, well, we're all servants doing God's work with the gifts that we've all been given, right? And thank God that many of us, our songs get played, which unfortunately not everybody's song gets to get played. But as a servant leader, I just look at the very strong correlation between us and doing God's work. So I'm so glad that you said that way. And the sponge-like thing, which I never forget, Nike, that was such a big thing when we started working at Nike. Be a sponge. You got to be a sponge. And as much as they said it, I was like, okay, I get it. But then it really makes sense. You do want to be a sponge for the majority, if not all, of your life. There should never be a time when you can't sop up some more information, insight, or guidance. And so as I listen to you make that comment, I think, all right, what are some of the negative experiences or tropes, in the music industry that you've intentionally set out to fix? And I kind of feel like your comment about the servant leader is one of them, but I'll let you provide some context. And what industry bad habits do you think still need to be kind of solved for at scale?
Well, for starters, I want to say that I appreciate you tying the servant leader piece back to my faith, because that's where it begins. I think the biggest issue that I've seen in music that I think still exists, and I've tried to do as much to advocate as I possibly can, is the way that women are treated in the music business. I don't think that there's enough respect, appreciation. There's not enough uplifting. There's not enough senior leadership positions that are made available for women. And then when you go beyond that and you look at women of color, it's tough. And I still see men not value women's opinions as much as they should, not support them or position them as they should. And it was I've watched it for a very long time, and I felt I felt a way about it for a very long time. But it became more real when my daughter started talking about being in the music business, and I'm like, hell no, and when yeah, I'm like, hell no, and I had to think about why, and then I had to check myself on not walking the walk as much as I should have over the years, right? Like when we look at what we asked from our, when we were talking about, during what transpired with George Floyd or Ahmaud Arbery or some of these other things, and some of my counterparts who are genuinely good people were, asking what they could do to assist or what they could do to help, or, and my response oftentimes was like, if I was getting jumped across the street, what are you going to do? I need you to jump in.
That's right.
Right. About jump in, get these people off me. Like, and in those rooms where I'm not in, and people are saying things or acting in a way that is racist,
they need to jump in.
Jump in. I want you to do something. I want you to speak up about it, right? And I had to check myself about that with females in music. Like, I need to walk the walk. I need to do more. I need to do more to change. I need to not allow you. I need to make and it was little things for me, Astor, like, hold on, like, let this woman finish her thought.
Right.
Like, or even for me, I'm sorry, I mean to cut you off. Let me.
That's right. You got to be an example. You got to be an example. What's so funny that you mentioned that? Something that I learned recently, that I too started to become even more sensitive to these things with 3 girls, and ensuring that all the work that I'm doing in the world is setting the world up for them to be able to walk into it and be their unapologetic, authentic, amazing selves. And somebody brought something to my attention of, and I was listening to a young lady who was an executive and just sharing, when we get on these emails or in these conversations and everybody says, hey guys,
right.
Like, but it's not all guys. And I was like, wow. And I do that so often. So I shut that down. It's no longer, hey guys, when it's a room of mixed individuals. It's like good people or hey team or those things, because it's the small nuances, like you said, and that's where we got to start. So I just want to jump in because I'm right there with you on it starts with the small things of being the example.
And I told my team, the young ladies on my team, I told them, like, look, pull my coattail, like it was I was referring to a group of young ladies that we work with, and I kept calling them the girls. And after the meeting, one of my teammates said, hey, that's you shouldn't call them the girls, and even if they don't, even if they're not offended by it, but the way in which you refer to them will say a lot about you, meaning me, right? And it was like, that's exactly why I encouraged my team to speak up, because I wouldn't have thought twice about it, and using the proper adjectives and like just all of those things that become, different, like that we don't think about as much as we should. Those things are front of mind for me, and when I see someone, not treating a woman as they should be treated or giving them the respect that they should, I'm speaking up about it.
Right.
And I'm like, this young lady did this person did this, she did this, like, in giving that proper credit where it's due. But to me, that's part of the music business or entertainment business that still is far behind where it should be in 2023.
Yeah, and you're leading as being an example, which I love. Talk about the power of going independent and taking what I would say is probably the biggest bets on yourself. And I only ask this question because I think it's so necessary for others to hear what's possible outside of what we've all been programmed to think and do in terms of how we're supposed to maneuver through this thing called life.
Yeah, the great thing about, so I give you an example. I had a conversation with a friend recently, and we're talking about, he asked me about the difference now between the music business now and the music business when I came in it. And my answer was the toolbox that these young artists have and young executives have. So his response was like, what do you mean by that? And I said, Well, let me age myself a little bit and tell you what my toolbox did not include when I came.
Right.
Right. We didn't have the internet.
Mm,
My,
that part.
my toolbox didn't have the internet. So we literally had to go city to city, state to state, country to country, hand to hand promo. We had to do it hand to hand. We didn't, let alone social media, let alone the technology that, we had to figure out how to scrape up enough coins to get into a studio to make a record that you could essentially do on your iPhone right now. It's like, so, when you talk about independence and taking that bet is hedged a little bit, right? Because you have tools that we didn't have previously. So when we were going out and signing these record deals, as lopsided as they were, it was kind of a necessary evil, because we didn't have the resources to go into the studio. We didn't have the resources to market and promote ourselves. We didn't have, you couldn't go and shoot a video, like a music video like this. Right. So homeboy holding the camera, we couldn't do that. We had to, so we were kind of forced into those things. Like even with radio and, these other things, all of those gatekeepers that existed, that stuff doesn't exist anymore. It's like I was with Miguel he had a show in LA, and we were chopping it up for a minute, and I was talking to him about the there's no expiration date on great, right? On classic music. It doesn't have an expiration date. But the great thing about what's happening now is these kids on TikTok decided 10 years later, 11 years later, that Sure Thing was going to be a hit again. And guess what? It sits at 5 weeks at number one at radio. And it's unprecedented. Never happened. Yeah. Never been a record that's come back 10 years later and become number one and sat number one at radio, at pop radio, by the way, for 5 weeks. So, but it's like, young people decided, you don't tell us when this is going to be a hit again. And guess what? That's what it is. So I think the tools that people have and the ability, I couldn't preach independence with confidence and optimism without understanding all of the tools that young people have to use these days.
Yeah, no, that's so well said. So well said. And I agree with you 1,000% in terms of your bet is hedged, as you said, a lot more these days with all the resources and the tools. And I think one of the resources and tools is one of, people that might inspire you or that you can look to as inspiration for something, as a mentor and as an example. And I think, you humbly mentioned this earlier. You grew up with one of the most inspiring icons in your father, in Dr. J. But I wonder if you were also inspired by others outside of that coming up.
I tell people as often as I possibly can, my mentors, my leaders, the people that inspire me on a daily basis are my friends. I watch what you do. I watch what Kenny does. I watch what, and then, like my close friends, Troy and Ryan and Sterling, and, those are my dudes, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I watch what they do. I go over, every time I go to Troy's house, I'm like, damn, my nigga, we were partners for a long time. Like my house, this art was a little different over here. You know what I'm saying?
Hair's a little different. Everything's a little different.
Everything's a little different over here. Like, do I need to audit? Or like, it's like when I watch my friends, when I see you create this platform, when I watch my friends do things where I'm like, damn, like I got to go harder. You know what I'm saying? Like I gotta continue to move. My dudes are out here still moving and shaking and doing things in a real way. And it's, you are who you're with is what I've said to a lot of young people. So my homies that I'm with is they're doing their thing.
So, usually we end these sessions asking, what would be the 3 seeds you'd want to share with the stewards of culture moving forward?
One would be working hard. I think it sounds very simple, but I think and again, I've learned there was times in which I thought I was working really hard, and I'm get around a friend or someone that I'm doing business with, and I'm like, okay, there's another gear, to this, and and through that work you gain experience, and that experience becomes your information, and the information is your power. So through that work and kind of putting the work in, you're making yourself more powerful and stronger on a daily basis. But one would be, really putting the work in and working hard. Two would be moving with integrity. And I feel like the reason that I'm still able to be in this game in a very real way is that I've moved with integrity throughout the years. If I say I'm going to do something, I do my best to do it and get it done. I don't lie, I don't cheat, I don't steal, I do good business. I move with integrity. So even people that, that we managed before, ended up not doing business with, I could still call on those people because I never,
That's right.
I never lied to them. I never stole from them. I never cheated them. I always try to do fair deals. So two would be moving with integrity. And I think the third thing would be, back to, what we touched on earlier in terms of network and, building your network and being there for people, showing up for people, showing up for, your friends and your people in a very real way, and building meaningful relationships, right? And not just when you need something, it's like,
That's right.
when my phone rings and I can see you coming a mile away, like I know this phone call or this email or this text is either going to cost me something or there's going to be some ask on the other side of it. Nobody can see that person coming, right? But when when there's a genuine relationship, and sometimes I'm calling you to say, Astor, what's up? You good? Like,
That's right.
You all right? Like, I was just checking in. I was just wanting to see if you were straight. Like showing up for your friends and your people and being there for them when they need you to be is sometimes time consuming. Sometimes it's gonna pull you away from other things, but it's important because when you need those people to show up for you, they're gonna be there for you. So
Right.
the third piece would be, build a solid network, and again, I can't emphasize how much you are who you're with. I want to spend time and I want to build with people that are like-minded, that are going to push me, steel sharpen steel. I want to be around people that are going to motivate me on a daily basis. And the great thing about the way that my life is set up is it's my friends,
Right.
that I get to do that with, and people that I enjoy being around, I enjoy talking to, and it's, that's what makes it all special for me and where I'm at. But that's a lot of years of building really genuine relationships.
Yeah. And so, I got to thank you for being very intentional with your integrity, and sharing those 3 seeds, which are spot on with who you are. And I'm glad you're sharing them with others. But just having the understanding of you're being so intentional with your integrity has been something that, again, I've seen you do in a very humble fashion, but with such impactful outcomes. So I want to applaud you for the way you move, and the way you've impacted and will continue to impact culture that goes way beyond just your success, but more so for the significance of many others. And I just want to thank you.
Thank you, Astor. I appreciate your kind words, man. We'll talk soon.
All right, boy.
We truly appreciate your support because it helps us fulfill our mission of promoting cultural awareness and personal development. Please click the subscribe button below to help ensure and solidify our mission.